Man, I've been so blessed already. A baptism, how good do things get around here? And that music, incredible. You know, some of the happiest years I spent in ministry were when I was at an academy church as the pastor on their campus. And I hope that all of you members here stop and think once in a while about what a great privilege you have to be a part of that. You know, the students that come from all over the conference, and some of them even from all over the world, bring a vibrancy here that you just can't miss. And it's wonderful to be on a campus and with you all and worshiping today. I want to give you a verse right here that kind of sums up my experience, and I strongly suspect it does yours as well. And I know there's a lot of Bible verses that do that, but this one here, oops, I'm off. Here we go. Now I'm on, and there it is. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And I know you can identify with that first part of it there. I find it interesting that it puts that in the past tense, all have sinned, and you can look back at your life and go, yeah. But the second part is in the present tense, and fall short of the glory of God, which says to me, even when I'm doing pretty good, and I don't feel like I've got this overt sin hanging over my life that I haven't confessed, or any of those kind of things that run around in your head, I'm still short of the glory of God at my best moments. That's the reality that I feel like I live under. What can be done? I don't know if any of you recognize any of these people in this next photo here. We got it up there. There we go. Anybody recognize anyone? I'm going to help you out. It's okay. On the right side of the screen, looking to his left, is, well, the Sports Illustrated, who owns this photograph, says is an unidentified bat boy. We're not going to be talking about him. Opposite him on the other side, that would be Whitey Ford, who is in the Hall of Fame now. We're also not going to be talking about him. But that shell-shocked guy right in the middle, that's one of my favorite authors of all time, George Plimpton. And not just because he wrote about sports, which it didn't hurt, but just because he really, really writes well. He led an amazing life, which we're going to talk a little bit about here. And in that life, he invented something brand new that he referred to as participatory sports journalism, which means not only, I've played baseball, and so I can write about baseball, but I'm going to play baseball against the best in the world, even though I'm just an ordinary person, no special athletic skills. And then write about what it's like to be among these amazingly gifted athletes. And he hit upon it one day and said, how am I going to make that happen? It's going to be kind of tough to do that because who do I know where I can get involved? Now, he did have some interesting connections out there. For one thing, he was raised in an upper-class family and went to Harvard. And immediately upon his release, he went into the Army and became a demolitions expert, blowing stuff up. That led to eventually his appointment as the fireworks commissioner for the city of New York, where he set 2 world records. One was for the largest Roman candle ever fired off. He managed that on his second attempt. It was also his second world record. The first world record was the largest crater ever left by a firework, which was a failed attempt to set off the world's largest firecracker. So he blows stuff up. Pretty cool. But where he really got his connections was after he got out of the Army, he set up a literary magazine called the Paris Review, very highbrow, very few copies made. I've never seen a copy of it. One of those magazines that nobody reads, but it seems to limp on year after year, losing money. Well, there's a good reason why it limped onward, because it turns out the magazine was a front for the CIA. So not only does he blow stuff up, but he's a spy. And he is known a little bit in the publishing world, and so he got a hold of Sports Illustrated, and he said, this is what I want to do. I would like to go out and pitch, because he was a pitcher in high school, against some professional athletes, and then write a story about it for you. I says, oh, okay. You know, we know about your background as a journalist. Maybe we can let this thing happen. So they arranged for him. It was at an all-star game, but not like they have now, where it's in the middle of the season. It was at the end of the season in 1956, and it was at Yankee Stadium, and they said, we're going to let you pitch all the way through the lineup of both the National and the American League. And the reason they looked so shell-shocked in that picture is because he couldn't make it all the way through the National League alone. It exhausted him. They had to come out to the mound and tell him, I think you're done. It turns out it's hard work giving up tape measure home runs. And he had a funny way about it. You know, when you're an ordinary person among extraordinary people, things go differently for you. You ever watch a pitcher who has just given up a home run? They're looking at the ground. They're kicking dirt, they're getting a rosin bag, and they're thinking about the next hitter. They don't want to watch that ball going away. They don't want to watch the guy rounding the bases. They act like that's got nothing to do with me. Not George. He turned around on the first home run that got hit off of him and watched that ball rocketing out of the stadium and had this odd sense of accomplishment. Like he had helped create this beautiful thing. Look what we did. And he wrote the article, and it was successful. And he got thinking about it and said, that was a lot of fun. I want to do it again, but I made a big mistake. I didn't train. I did not get ready for this experience. And so I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to prepare. And now I would have said to myself, okay, if I'm going to do this again, bowling, tennis maybe, golf. Not George, right into the deep end of the pool. He went boxing. There he is with the man who was at that time the light heavyweight champion of the world, Archie Moore. The champ would be the one without the blood all over him. And interesting side note on Archie Moore, he became a Seventh-day Adventist and spent a lot of time doing inner-city work in Los Angeles among young people. But back to George, what he did to get ready for this event was he hired a trainer, he hired a guy to shadow box with him, or sparring partner, and he went to the gym regularly, and he did everything like he was training for a prize fight. And then he got into the ring. A curious thing happened on his way to that fight, though. He had a friend who also was acquainted with Archie Moore. And sometime before the fight, this friend ran into the champ at a restaurant. And he says, hey, I hear you're going to fight my friend George Plimpton. Yeah, some writer, I don't know what that's all about. Oh, he thought, let's have some fun with this. Oh, you haven't heard of George Plimpton? Here's the real story there. He's a really good amateur. And he knows he's not going to beat you, but he figures if he does good enough, then when he starts his professional career, it won't be down at the bottom of the ticket. He maybe can start up fighting for a little bit higher person right off the bat. Well, that made the champ mad. Because he believed if you want to get to the top, you got to fight your way from the bottom. He said, I'm going to teach him a lesson. And then George's friend could not convince him that he was just kidding. So when they got into the ring and the bell goes off, Archie Moore comes out of his corner ready to do some damage. And by the time he got to the center of that ring where George was, just watching him cross that few feet, he realized, no, this is a rider. So he took it easy on him. And in fact, he did more than just take it easy on him. He started coaching him. Got to keep your feet moving. Get that arm up. I'm going to hit you if you don't get that arm up, you know. And by the third round, George realized he'd taken a few pops, but the champ had not really clobbered him a good one. So he said to him, you know, you're going to have to hit me. Well, I don't want to hurt you. I said, I'm trying to write about this experience. If I don't really get hit, I have not experienced boxing. Okay, the logic was flawless. But he never saw the glove coming. In rapid succession, he says, I tasted leather, then blood, then canvas. Didn't knock him out, but he also didn't ask Archie Moore to hit him again. And when the fight was over and he went back to his hotel room, he sat down immediately at his typewriter because he didn't want to lose that experience. And while his head was ringing like a telephone, he wrote the whole article out. And Atlantic Monthly picked it up. And overnight, everybody was talking about George Plimpton. And this amazing experience that he had had and how he could explain things in a way that other people couldn't because they didn't experience what he was willing to put himself out for. And offers started coming in from everywhere. I first became acquainted with him back when I was a freshman at Indiana Academy, and I read the book Paper Lion, which was his experiences at training camp with the Detroit Lions. Am I hitting the wrong button, maybe? Trying to advance the slide to, nope, not that way. Let's go the other way. There's the boxing. There he is, number 0, which he thought was appropriate. Spent the whole training camp with them, learning how to play the position of quarterback, which he then did quite unsuccessfully, for 4 downs in a scrimmage game, offense against defense, all on the same team. But his experiences there, while, you know, interesting for him and good for the public, also started to ingratiate him with athletes. They loved George Plimpton because not only was he a nice guy, not only did he write admiringly of their abilities, but they said it was like somebody up in the stands with no gifts of their own, who was nevertheless heaping abuse down on the players, suddenly found himself on the field. And learning that the Chicago defense is tougher than you think. And so George got this great gig going where he was doing television specials and magazine articles and writing books when, after having been a trapeze artist at the Cole Brothers Circus, playing tennis against Pablo Casals, racing the Baja 1000. All these cool stuff that, you know, we all want to do and we all want to be. George got to be those things. So he blows stuff up. He's a spy. He's a semi-athlete. He's a writer. Man, this guy's got something for everybody. But age was starting to catch up with him. And he began to feel like, I've never been as fast as they are, and I'm slowing down even more, so time to not do this. But the good folks back at Sports Illustrated got an idea, and they called him up and they said, we're sending you to training camp again. And he says, no, I think I'm done. Oh, no, we got your ticket. You're heading to Boston. I said, I don't want to do it anymore. And they said, camp starts in 1 week. See ya. Better start packing. And so he went off and did it one more time, and only this time, he played hockey. I mean, if you think boxing is violent, you know, Rodney Dangerfield's old line, I went to a fight the other night and a hockey game broke out. double zero this time. There he is on his face against the Philadelphia Flyers in an exhibition game where after training camp he spent 5 minutes as goalie. It was the only position that he could skate close enough to actually do. And he said he was really surprised that the scoreboard could keep up with all the pucks that went into the net behind him. Towards the end of his time there, though, one of his teammates, he believes it was on purpose, so he could get the full experience, committed a flagrant foul which resulted in a penalty shot. Well, for those of you unfamiliar, that's where the goalie's in the cage and one person from the other team gets to take the puck and take one shot at him, and everybody else is all the way at the other end of the ice. And so the guy they did this, his name, oddly enough, was Reggie Leach. Some of you may remember when Reggie Leach was here at Campion Academy, but I worked with him in the Minnesota conference. He's in Arizona now, a treasurer. Anyway, this guy, same name, that's probably the only similarity, starts coming down the ice, moving that puck back and forth on his stick towards George. And George remembered his training, and so he starts moving out from the net a little bit to cut down the angles. And one of the things that you do to defend at a time like that is you lay down on the ice. Because now they can't shoot underneath you, and you got this big mitten on that you can hold up in the air and smack down the puck if they try to shoot it over the top of you. So just as Leach cranks back for his shot, George goes down on the ice, the puck comes in, ricochets off of his skate wide of the net. And the stadium erupts in cheering. And George's teammates pour out onto the ice and they grab him and hoist him up on their shoulders and start skating around the rink. And the noise and bedlam was so loud that his teammates couldn't hear what he was trying to say to them. I fell down. I guess it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. Well, he hung up his skates and his ball glove and everything else and said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. The aches and pains are just lasting too long. But something remained inside of him. A burning desire to be among the best in the world, even when you're just an ordinary guy. Where am I going to go that I can get that same experience? And he hit upon an idea, an orchestra. Now he's got something for everybody. Here's something for you music lovers out there. I'm going to write what it's like for these world-class musicians to do what they do while I'm right there among them, practicing with them, and yet not quite able to do what they do. Well, there's a problem with this. You know, athletes, even the best of them, they're making mistakes all the time. They only get away with it because the other ones are all making mistakes too. But musicians, you don't make mistakes when you're in an orchestra. That gets you out of the orchestra. So what world-class orchestra was going to let some guy come in there? You just can't walk in and say, I'd like to sit in on fiddle for the next concert if you don't mind. But there was one conductor out there who said, I think we can do this. Leonard Bernstein. I mean, he may be the most famous conductor ever. He was with the New York Philharmonic, and he says, George, if I put you in the percussion section and just give you the really, really simple things, like, you know, banging a couple blocks of wood together, rattling a tambourine, kind of stuff we all did in kindergarten, you'll still be among all these great musicians. And you'll still sit through the practices and learn what they have to do and be able to write about the experience. And George said, let's do it. So he joins the orchestra. And he's not just sitting in practice. He's actually out there during the concerts doing the easiest stuff. Turns out it was not easy enough. He messed up on a triangle one time. And that was it. Bernstein threw him out, fired him. You can't be a part of this orchestra. People who hear things like that want their money back. You're done. Well, he didn't have his story yet, but he had made friends, at least in the percussion section, and so they took him out for dinner that night to try and console him. And in the process of it, they said, you know what? I think we can get you back in the orchestra. George said, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. No, this was just a temperamental artist having a little bit of a fit. He'll get over it, and tomorrow he'll feel better, and it'll work out. You'll see. Oh, I don't know. He sounded pretty mad. Well, just come with us in the morning. So the next morning, the whole section troops into Leonard Bernstein's office, George following along with his head down. And they begin to plead his case. And George can hear that the conductor is having none of it. Absolutely not. So he just sat there, uncomfortable, looking at his shoes. But after a while, he thought he heard maybe a little bit of softening on Bernstein's part. And then he hears a long, well, and the room gets silent. So George looks up, and Bernstein is glaring at him. And he says, I'll tell you what. In 3 weeks, we're going to be in Winnipeg, Canada. And I'm going to give you one note. And you are not going to miss your entrance on that one note, because I am going to give you the most obvious piece of direction in the history of music. And you got 3 weeks to practice. Get out of my office. So just like that, the whole section leaves the office and they go and they start practicing, where turns out George's one note is on a giant gong. Right at the crescendo of Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony. Should be easy enough, right? You grab the mallet and you hit the thing. But you got to know how far away from the gong to stand. And you got to know the angle to the gong that you need to have, and exactly how to place your feet, and how to grip that mallet, and where on the length of it to grip. How every part of your body, from your toes to your eyes, must be positioned. When to start that swing so it's going to strike at the right time. How fast to swing. How hard to swing. And where on the surface of that gong you have to land the mallet. This is a guy who had trained with professional training camps, flipped around on a trapeze, for crying out loud. And yet he said it was the most intense training of his life to get ready for that one note. And part of what made it so intense was because it seemed so simple. And part of it was that because he knew there was nowhere to hide. This was right at the crescendo of the symphony. And part of it was he desperately did not want to let Leonard Bernstein down. And so week after week he practiced. And in the evenings, when all of the orchestra had played their concert, which he had to watch from the audience, and they got back to the hotel and they probably wanted a break from music, George Plimpton would get out his record player. You can take your phones and look it up if you have to. And he would play a recording of Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony, listening for his moment and, playing a little air gong to try and coordinate with it. Night of the concert came. Winnipeg, Canada. George is sitting in a wooden chair at the back of the percussion section while the concert went on. Finally, the last piece of the evening, Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony. He stands up, puts his feet where they belong, got rosin on his hands, he's holding a mallet. He looks at the conductor. Bernstein nods at him and then begins conducting the music. And all through it, George is following along with his music in front of him. No notes for him to play yet. And he's counting off the measures. And after a while, he realizes the entire percussion section is very softly counting with him, making sure that he doesn't lose his timing. And when the moment came, he looked up at Bernstein, who turned toward him with his eyes bugging out, teeth clenched, swung the baton right at George and hissed, "Now!" Exactly at that time, the principal of the percussion section said to him, "Hit it!" And George swung that mallet and struck that gong harder than a gong has ever been struck. And he said the sound was so loud and sudden that, in his words, the musicians seated in front of him jumped like beans on a hot griddle. And it rolled down the concert hall, bounced off the back, and echoed up towards the stage again. So loud that Bernstein had to pause the orchestra for a full measure to let it die down. And George was crestfallen. He stood up there holding the mallet, sweating profusely, looking at his feet and panting and thinking, I ruined it. I had one note to play and I blew it and I have ruined the whole symphony. It was way too loud and maybe even a little too soon. He had never felt so defeated in his entire life, even though he had spent his life writing about his failures. And suddenly he heard a very soft noise. I didn't know this. I'm not a musician, so I didn't know this until I read the article about this experience. But musicians have a way of applauding each other in an orchestra that you don't hear out there. When somebody does a solo and they do really good, they shuffle their feet. And George heard the sound of the entire New York Philharmonic Orchestra shuffling their feet. And to his amazement, he thought, that's for me. And so he dared to look up at the conductor. And Bernstein's arms are leading the orchestra through the denouement, but he is looking right at George. And there's a smile on his face. And he nodded and mouthed the word, yes. And when the music was over, all of the audience and the orchestra members stood up in a standing ovation, with Bernstein joining them for George Plimpton, who was, to his amazement, a one-note triumph. And a couple weeks later, he missed his entrance with some sleigh bells and got fired again. But now he had his story, and he had a legacy for the rest of his career. During practice, when Bernstein wanted the orchestra to really emphasize a section, he would say, now, let's give this the Winnipeg sound. Okay, so what's my point in all of this? If all of human history, from the moment that God breathed life into Adam, to the moment when Jesus comes again to claim his own, were thought of as a single piece of music, one long symphony, then the life of any one person in it is one note. That's it. Even Methuselah didn't get more. And most of us are not going to be a loud blast on a trumpet in the middle of a solo. We're going to be a little chirp on a piccolo. The kind of thing that most of the audience isn't even going to realize happened. But the conductor hears it. The conductor hears every note. He knows where they all belong and exactly how they're supposed to be played. And he has given each one their assignment for that one note. How am I supposed to live my little one-note life? I think the experience of George Plimpton in the orchestra can be instructive. First of all, take it seriously. It's the only life you got. You don't have a do-over. So make it count. Second thing is, listen to other people who have been this way before and who can help you along your way. Most importantly, keep your eyes on your conductor and follow his instructions at all times. And finally, when your time comes, give it all you got. Don't hold back anything. I think that's sound advice. And I have tried, somewhat intermittently, to live that way. And you know what the results of that are? I keep coming right back around, one too far, back up one, to where we started our sermon today. One more back. I'm going to let them control it up there because clearly I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an amateur in the midst of professionals who are up there trying to carry me through this. That's where I feel I am a lot of the time. Can you identify with that with me? For all my good intentions, for all my effort, I'm a sinner who falls short of the glory of God. And I can't shake that reality. That's what it is. The good news is that's not the entirety of my reality, any more than it's the entirety of the Scriptures. Because if we move from Romans now to 2 Corinthians, this is also in the Bible, and this is just as true. And this is where our hope lies. God made him, who's him? God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You get it? All have sinned, but it says God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. All have fallen short of the glory of God, and yet through him we can become the righteousness of God. When we make Jesus our Lord and Savior, our entire standing changes. And that really matters. Because someday I'm going to come face to face with my Maker. And I'm going to know something on that day. I know it now, but I'm absolutely convinced I'm going to know it on that day in a way that is not possible for me to really grasp right now. I will know that I'm a failure. I fall short. There's only one thing I want at that time. The shuffling applause of the world is going to mean nothing. I only want to be able to look up into the face of my conductor and see a smile. And hear the words, "Well done. Well done. Good and faithful servant. I gave you one note, and no matter what you think of your performance, because of my son, in my ears, it was perfect." Enter into the joy of your Lord.